see this sign, and 1 mile after,
Can you say it again? We didn't hear you.
hot box detector.
Hot box detector.
Yeah. So
Thank you.
1 mile after, you're gonna see this sign. There's gonna be a little house like this with an antenna. As soon as we go through that little house, it's gonna check if our wheel bearings are not overheating. Okay? Every 10 to 30 miles, there's a hot box detector. Back then, we used to have a caboose. What was the part of his job? The guy working the caboose was sticking his head outside to see if there's smoke. The smoke means it means something's wrong. But now every 10 to 30 miles, we make sure our wheel bearings or wheels are not overheating. Actually, not my train, but one of our train, we had a hot box. It's rare in my career. 3 times it happens. So, but hot box detector is very important once again for our safety. Why do we have those propane tanks? Is it for the locomotive engineer to have barbecue in the summer? No? No, it's for this time of the year when it's cold, freezing cold, and there's a lot of snow or even rain that's turning to ice. You have to make sure when they're switching, you want to make sure those switches work perfectly. So the propane are there to warm up those switches, that they work. That's the reason. Every time you're going to see a propane, it's right beside where they're switching or going. You have to think there is a mountain behind it, and let's say there's a rock going down, it will triggers one of, we call it the slide detector. We'll trigger one of the wire and we go through an emergency stop. So I got a little story about, now it's probably 8 years ago. I was the dining car steward going back to Vancouver. I will always remember that day. We were on time and going through the Rockies on time. Sun is setting, perfect. And then a big rock hit the tree. Triggers one of the wires. We go to an emergency stop. And I will, dining car steward, like I mentioned, I was right in front of my wine cabinet, pouring wine, and I heard wine, and I heard shh. That means I know we go to an emergency. I yell at everybody in the dining car, hold on to something, because when we go to an emergency stop, sometimes it can be. So what happened? When we stop, we move forward, and then there's a big kickback. And when there's a kickback, well, actually what happened, all the wine collapsed. I was red and white. And all the wines, the wine glass is also part of it. It was all destroyed. But my big worry is if someone's going to hop you. They don't hold carefully to the rail going up the parked car, for example. You fly. So nobody got injured. A miracle. And it was a brutal. So mile 0 to 0, there's always a CMT ready in case of an emergency, like this one, to remove the rock and then repair the track. Well, where do you think it happens? Right in the middle. Just for them to come and showed up, it took about 4 hours. Okay? And then they had to remove to do the work. Another 4 hours. So that 8 hours. But I mentioned earlier hot box detector. Because we went to an emergency stop, 16 set of wheels were damaged. So we had a speed restriction of 25 miles per hour until Vancouver. Back then, you have to understand, back then we were not late. We're always close to on time, maybe 1 hour, and so we were 19 hours behind schedule for that trip. And everything was smooth. But because of the slide detector, everybody's safe. Okay?
More important.
Now the lights. You cannot see. So, but what you need to, I'm not a locomotive engineer. I don't know all the combination. If I were, I would be driving the thing and making a lot of money. Okay, it's not the case. But what you need to know, some system use one light, two lights, and three lights. The top one is the most important. Always the top one. In this case, for example, the top one, it's green. Green. And this is the locomotive. As soon as we enter, we call it a block. As soon as we enter the post, it's green. As soon as we enter, the green turns red. It's for the guy behind us. If you have an emergency, you must have enough space to stop. So that's the reason red means you stop, but green, you're okay to enter the block. Okay, green, we go. When you drive your car, what does yellow means usually? Caution, that is correct. So, for example, this one is flashing in the middle. It's called clear limited. It's 45 miles per hour. And this one is called clear medium. This combination 30 miles per hour. So you're gonna have green, you're okay to go, and then yellows on top in a combination. Say either slow down, you're getting close to a freight train, or slow down, you're gonna go on a siding very shortly. And this combination is here called restricted signal. We go on the siding. Why do we go to the siding? Why do we're 11 hours late? Most freight trains. There's two main reasons why we're late. Why the freight train we put us aside all the time? First of all, they own the track. CN owns the track. So we VRL, we just rent the track, we pay per mile, per car, and the reality, we cannot compete with freight train. Every freight train that you see is worth millions of dollars. And as a passenger train, you just cannot compete with it. Okay? And welcome to America, money talks. That's the way it is. That's one. And number two, not many people knows that, but between Toronto to Vancouver, approximately 80% of the track system, it's only a single line. That leaves only 20% a double line or a train yard. So that means for approximately 80% of the time you have to share one line, like right now. So what they have done, they put a siding. So one train can go on a siding, but most of the siding are 1.8 miles long. Now they have 3 miles long freight train. What do you think is small, fit perfectly into the siding?
Yeah.
Yes, so it probably happened already overnight or last night or for you. We're gonna have to wait for one beautiful long freight train, 3 miles long, because it does an hour or 2 hours on a siding, because it doesn't fit in any siding. He has to go until he meets the double track. So we're gonna be waiting patiently for them to come by. Okay, that's one of the reasons why we often late. They own the track, and the priority we're not far. You know, it's hard for passenger train to come. About this train was built in 1954 by a company bought from the United States. There's not many cars like this. This train there's not many cars with stainless steel, beautiful shell like we have today. Each car's got a name. For example, this car is called the park car. Do you know why we call this car the park car? It's named after famous national parks. So sometimes we have Banff Park, Banff National Parks. Each car's got a history. For example, there's two kinds of sleeping cars accommodation. If you go right next door to Prestige Chateau, it's a Chateau cars. They're named after famous French Canadian. Not on this side, the opposite side, when you open the door, there's a description of Radisson Chateau. What Monsieur Radisson has done for the country of Canada. Just take 10 seconds to read what he has done. If you're in car 10, 11, 12, 13, they're all manor cars, and they're named after famous English Canadian. So if you go between room F4 and bedroom A in a corner, there's going to have like Bell Manor. What Mr. Bell has done, Graham Bell, the is. The dining car are all named after famous hotel across the country. Sometimes we have the Empress, the famous Empress in Victoria. Sometimes we have the Frontenac dining car, Chateau Frontenac. It's a famous hotel restaurant across the country. Okay. About the speed we're going to go through today. In the prairies, we can go up to 85 miles per hour. There's little part we can go 85 miles per hour. They allowed us. But most of the day, if we keep going, it's going to be between 60 to 80 miles per hour in the prairies. Tomorrow, as soon as we get close to the Rockies, we're going to have around 45 miles per hour to 35 miles per hour because there's lots of groups. Okay. If we're allowed to go 80 miles per hour, that means it's safe? Yes, because if they allowed us to go 80 miles per hour, it is safe. We're entitled to go that speed. We will never go above the limits. There's GPS in front of us, and they know exactly where we are in our speed too. So they're not going to lose their job for it. Just to go a few miles above, they're not going to lose their job. That's one. That's a misconception. We go too fast. They try to save up time. If we go, let's say 80 miles per hour, because the track speed allow 80 miles per hour. Okay, that's one. There's always two locomotive engineers. Their shifts are about 6 to 8 hours on average, and maximum they're allowed by law 12 hours. They will never go more than 12 hours. At this time of the year, winter is the worst time because everything frees up. They're like on the way up for us. Our locomotive engineer times up twice. So that means for 12 hours, they ran out of their 12 hours, close to their 12 hours. So what happened? The locomotive engineer that were supposed to pick them up, let's say at the town in an hour away, they took a cab, they met at their crossing and they switched locomotive engineer. So it happens. The other day, my last trip, that was a sad thing. As soon as we leave Winnipeg, it was minus below 40, and you had to switch manually the switches, and something from the switch went up a spring, and he hit the locomotive engineer in the head, and he had 4 stitches because of it. But that means we lost a locomotive engineer, so we had to call a new locomotive engineer. 2 hours, and just let you know he's okay. He went to the hospital, he's okay. But things like that happen, especially when it's super cold. This is the worst time for us in terms of, that's one of the reasons we're off so late, because when it's very cold, the knuckle between the freight train, when you move suddenly, you break. And if you got a 3 miles long freight train, locomotive have to carry that knuckle and change it on site. But if you have to walk 2 miles or 3 miles, it takes 3-4 hours, and nobody can move to change, and nobody can move while changing. So that means to create more freight traffic. So some things like that happen. So, what is the heaviest car and the lightest car we have on board, and why, except the locomotive? It is. You got that right. It is the heaviest. Can I give you a little example why it is the heaviest? When I started 17 years ago, back then, 34 of us has been hired, and I was fortunate. I put my application early in the years. I was one of the most senior. And in the summer, there's a big train, and there's always 2 dining cars. And when I started 17 years ago, you wash dishes. That's what you were doing. And I always, because I was senior, I always wanted to work in the front dining car. Why? When you wash dishes, the water goes shh. Back here, especially in the prairies, the water goes shh, and you're all wet all day long. But I'm telling you that story because it shows that there's a swing movement. And the park car is the heaviest car because it's got huge metal plate underneath to keep it grounded, to stop the swing effect. Okay? But what is the lightest now? Car.
Baggage.
Except the locomotive, actually, that's the heaviest of them all. Lightest, the baggage car. The baggage car is the lightest. Yeah, we got 2 locomotives right now. They're 3,000 horsepower, so we got 6,000 horsepower each. if you're wondering. Any question for me at this time? Yes.
The train's going 80 miles an hour.
Yes.
How long does it take it to stop? In other words,
It all depends how many cars we have.
Okay.
But a block should be enough.
A block should be enough.
Should be enough. Yeah. So it depends how long. It's the block.
Yeah.
Some in the prairies, the block can be 8 miles, and in the prairie, in the Rockies, the blocks are on average 3 to 4 miles long.
Okay.
But our speed are 35 miles per hour.
So it's a lot. It's not going
Yeah,
fast.
exactly. Yes. It all depends where. In the Rockies, I don't have the number for you, but I know in the Rockies they have to dig deep because now they allow the double deck, and instead of blasting the rocks more, they dig deeper. So it all depends where, here or. So I don't have an exact number for you, unfortunately. You put the wood is here. You put about that much of the gravel, the rocks. So what's that? That would be my guess, but that would be my personal guess. I don't know if it's a real fact. Yeah. 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 That's another reason. You probably noticed there's a lots of ties, concrete ties on the side, also wood. But what happened in Canada, it's a different story in the States, but in Canada, we switched to the concrete because they thought longer, they save money. But what happened with the climate in Canada, they crack. And the wood, even though it's bad for the environment because of the creosote, the wood is more good with the hot and cold, and they don't crack. So now you're going to see lots of concrete ties. We're going back to the the wood tie, the wood ties. Any other questions? Yes.
CN is running freight trains both ways.
Yes.
Most of the time on a single line. That can't be very efficient for them. Are they doing anything to remedy that situation?
Okay. That's a good question, and I will tell you what the vice president told me. He was on board. I would say 3 years ago. He was on board, and I asked lots of questions why he was on board. The reason why the vice president was on board is that CN invests massively into the prairies, into infrastructure, and the president was coming into town to see. And the vice wanted to make sure where they put the money was the right place. And it was the vice president and all the staff around him. And I asked that question. He says, right, that's the way we maximize the money. Right now, it doesn't justify putting more double track. So for them, at this time, it says that's the way they maximize the profit. And when it will justify a double track, they will do it. It's all about money. Okay? Any other questions? It's money. Why?
People also have to contribute.
I know, but for them, it's their private corporation.
They did not want the